anyone can build this little sofa table or console table, and in this video I'll show you exactly how to do it. I just got back from Lowe's with all the materials for this project. If you guys need a list of all the materials I use, you can check down in the description. I'll put a list down there for you. So I think I'll start this sofa table today by working on the legs, and I'm just going to make those out of 2x4s like you see here, or as Matt Outlaw calls them, 2x4s. Anyways, to give them a little bit more natural look, I'm just going to trim a 1/4 inch off of each side using the table saw. So I think I want my sofa table to be 34 inches tall. So I'll go ahead and cut 6 of these legs to 33¼ inches. I almost had to pull out my toes there for a second. So now we've got all 6 of our legs cut out. Let's go ahead and set 2 of these aside, and we're going to work on the 4 outside legs. So to give these legs kind of a fancy look, on the bottom here, I'll measure 1.5 inches over from one side, and then I'll measure 8 inches up from the bottom on the other. Then I'll just connect those 2 marks with a line. Now I'll just cut this off with a circular saw. To make it a little bit easier to cut these things out, I'll go ahead and clamp them down to the workbench here. Okay, so I'm super picky and I want these all to match perfectly. So what I'll do is I'll clamp them all together, then I'll sand them with a 60 grit sandpaper. That way they all match perfectly. So I think what I'll do on these 2 middle legs is I'll measure 3/4 inch over on each side on the bottom here, and then from there I'll measure 8 inches up on each side, and then I'll just connect those marks. That way these middle legs will look a little bit more symmetrical. Do the same thing over here. 3/4. Alright, so now that the hard part's out of the way, let's go ahead and make the bracing out of some 1x2s. And to save a little bit of money, I'm going to rip down this 2x4 and make my own 1x2s. Alright, so for the front and back bracing, I'll use these longer 1x2s here, and then for the two sides, I'll use these shorter ones. Now, let's go ahead and put 2 pocket holes on each side of all of these pieces. I'll start by putting together the front side of my sofa table. I'll start with 2 of those 30.5-inch 1x2s. I'll attach these to the legs using wood glue and pocket screws. If you can't tell, I'm attaching these boards flush with the top of the legs, but I'm going to inset these 1/4 of an inch from the outside of the legs by laying down a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. Next, I'll make some marks 23 inches down from the top of the legs on all of these. I'll be attaching 2 more of those 30.5-inch 1x2s just below this line. And we'll attach these so that the back edge is flush with the back of the legs. Alright, let's take a quick look at the back here so you can kind of see what's going on. On these lower ones, I just have them flush with the back side of these legs here. And then up here on the top ones, I have them 1/4 inch, like I said, from the outside edge. Now I'll flip this thing over so you can take a quick look at the front. Here's a quick look at what that front side should look like. As you can see here, these bottom ones are kind of inset just a little bit. And then these upper ones are only inset 1/4 of an inch. It's going to make those legs stand out. Now let's put the back side together. It's exactly the same as the front. Once that's complete, we'll go ahead and put the front and the back together using those 10.5-inch 1x2s. On those outside boards, we'll mount those 1/4 inch from the outside edge of the legs, just like we did on the front and back. On those top boards, we'll mount those flush with the top of the legs. Then those lower boards will be 23 inches from the top. Then we'll just attach those last 4 1x2s in between these middle legs. Once we get all these boards on, we'll go ahead and attach that other side. Now that we've got the hard part out of the way, let's take our 16-inch piece of edge-glued lumber and rip it down to 15 inches wide. Then, we'll cut it to 72 inches long. Since we're already in the cutting mode, let's go ahead and pull out that 12-inch piece of edge-glued lumber. We need this one to be 69.5 inches long. Once that's complete, on this 12-inch board, we're going to cut a rectangle out in each of the 4 corners. Each of these little rectangles need to be 2 3/4 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide. We're also going to need a rectangle centered on each one of the 2 sides. These middle rectangles need to be 3 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide. Now it's time for a little bit of sanding, and in these tight spots I just wrapped a block of wood with that 60 grit sandpaper. On everything else, I'm using 180 grit sandpaper to give it a nice clean finish. To make things easy on myself, I'm going to stain and paint this thing before I assemble it anymore, but I just want to make sure this bottom board fits inside of here before I do that. It looks like it does, so now on to the part that nobody likes to do. Before I stain these tabletops, I am using a pre-stain before I do that. I think you'd be surprised how big of a difference it makes when you use this stuff. I've actually got a video where I compare using pre-stain to not using pre-stain. I'll put a card right here if you want to check that out.